Hello, it's February 25th, 2026, and this is your morning briefing from Anchor Watch. I'm Bobby Jones, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Um, the State of the Union was given by President Trump last night, and there are just so many things that I want to comment on, and I'll be brief. You know, the State of the Union is something that is actually mandated by the Constitution. It started out as a letter that former General George Washington sent to Congress. Then it morphed into a speech. Then it morphed into a policy um, driven device. And now it has become, under the Trump administration, a TV show. Um, Everything that happened at the State of the Union was designed for television. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but when you are having to rely on all the sizzle because there's a little steak, you have a problem. Three things jumped out at me immediately. First, which should be no surprise to anyone, are the economic lies that were told. Um, the cost of living for Americans, the cost of gas prices, all of these various things that President Trump made a point to hammer. Um, Make no mistake, every poll, to include those on the extreme right that are being shown, shows that Americans feel as though they are really feeling the heat from the cost of the increase of costs for food and basic items to live. So, affordability, a term which he poo-pooed during the speech, um, is a real thing that Americans care about. The other thing that jumped out was, when you're getting your butt kicked in the things you're supposed to be good at. In Trump's case, economics, and immigration, you go to the good old stalwart known as racism. And I'm going to be very clear when I say this. Um, the fear mongering of the immigrant population is something that fascists have done for centuries, but he made a point to hammer on that. He talked about different culture war issues that he believes resonates more than people trying to buy food to put on the table. Now, maybe he's right, but right now the polling shows that he's wrong. He talked about how one young lady was taken from her family because, um, something to do with transitioning, and she's now at Liberty University. But the whole thing of a judge taking a kid from their parents is what he tried to hammer. But at the same time, he does not mention how many kids have been taken from their parents with ICE and their actions. So the juxtaposition of who matters in America, what that looks like as far as policy being executed, he could not touch. The other thing that jumped out, the third thing that jumped out was the Democrats not standing up for him, and some of them not even being there, really, really got under his skin. Because in his mind, this was not a speech for America. This was a speech for people to tell him how great he is. And so many times during the speech, he pointed at the people, Democrats, and the Supreme Court, who was sitting right there, who he felt like had disrespected him. He made the State of the Union more of a State of Donald Trump speech. And based on how he is handling things, how his mentality is, his mental state is, the degradation that clearly everyone sees, a lot of things were amplified. Um, he also relied heavily on the military and their accomplishments. And he talked about his military accomplishments both in his first term and his second term, because, whether people want to admit it or not, he wants to be that generalissimo type. It's something that has always driven him, even though he dodged the draft 5 times. Um, the ABC News feed showed Mark Kelly looking dead at him when he was talking about military action and all of these different things. It was fascinating to watch because here in Mark Kelly, you have someone who has been there, done that, got the t shirt, and then because he's such a chronic underachiever, decides to go and become a NASA astronaut and now a U.S. Senator. The resumes do not remotely compare. But this was something that apparently bothered him, just watching the lack of energy shown by the Democrats, with the exception of a few like Ilhan Omar, who made a point to stand up for her people because he directly attacked Somali Americans in the speech. At the end of the day, I don't think the speech is going to do anything to sway hearts and minds back to his side. I think the price of living is still high. I think the price of what we could be potentially doing with Iran is significant. And most importantly, to quote Ronald Reagan, are you better off now than you were a year ago? And I would say overwhelmingly Americans would say no.